Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, as always, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Wahabar Chakodash, which Yahweh is the name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shai, that's whom this world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, it's his true name, and the Chakodash, that is the Holy Spirit. And I would like to also give double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and salutations to all you brothers out there. And I just want to do a quick lesson. As you can see in the title, it says, let's continue to make spiritual sacrifices and offerings to the Lord. And we know that, Passover, is coming up, okay? It's actually tomorrow night, at sundown, okay? And, with that being said, one of the elder brothers, one of the bishops out here in Chicago, he posted a scripture. It's in Sirach 35, and that's actually one of my favorite, some of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's in Sirach 30, the 35th chapter, from the first verse to about, give or take, the 7th, 8th verse. But in the 5th verse, it says, which I'm going to read soon, it says, thou shalt not appear empty before the Lord. Okay? And you see, we as Israelites, okay, as the followers and believers of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, we always have to have an offering, to the Lord. That's mandatory, okay? And, I was just thinking about that because, like the brother, he posted it for the Passover, for those reasonings. Brothers got to bring, bottle of wine, maybe some strong drink, whatever the case may be, right? But I was thinking about, us doing it, non-stop, okay, in a spiritual sense, all right? Because, let me get this first, because, there's an altar, right? A spiritual altar that is in place right now. Okay. With that being said, we got to, bring these spiritual sacrifices unto the Lord. You see, this is Isaiah chapter 19. Get straight to the point. It reads here, in that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. Okay. And that's not, talking about actual Egypt, out there in, northern Africa. No, that's talking about here in America. In the book of Revelation, I believe it's the 11th chapter, or is it the 10th chapter? I think it's the 11th chapter. It talks about how this place is spiritually known as Sodom in Egypt. Okay. All right. So that altar is here in America. That spiritual altar. Remember that. It's not an actual physical one. Okay. And look, we're not going to sit here and, sacrifice animals, turtle doves and, and goats and, so on and so forth, right? Lambs. No. We're not doing that here. All right. And look, if we were to do those things, we would be thrown in jail. Okay. Esau would, call, cruelty to animals, and he'd have all these different, charges on us. You see? All right. And anyways, the Lord doesn't even need these things anymore. Okay. Yahweh Shai was that ultimate sacrifice. You see? So those things are, done away with, the animal sacrifices. I believe the book of Hebrews speaks on that as well. All right. But, now, we as the followers and believers of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, we got to bring, these spiritual sacrifices here, okay, to the altar. Let me get that in the Sirach 35 now. Let's get that real quick. This is Sirach 35, and I'll start at 1, and it reads here, he that keepeth the law bringeth offerings enough. He that taketh heed to the commandment offereth a peace offering. He that requiteth a good turn offereth fine flour, and he that giveth alms sacrificeth praise. To depart from wickedness is a thing pleasing to the Lord, and to forsake unrighteousness is a propitiation. Thou shalt not appear empty before the Lord. See, you cannot appear empty before the Lord, you know. And I would say the biggest sacrifice is what, teaching and preaching. It says in Romans I think it's the 12th chapter. It says what, that present your bodies as a living sacrifice. You going out there and telling this world that we are the Israelites, we are the true people of the Bible. Telling the heathen nations who they are. What's going to happen to them, their downfall. Talk about Esau's destruction. Tell this world what's holy, what's profane. Okay? That's a heavy job. That's a heavy lot. That's something that's not to be taken, lightly. It's something that not everybody can even do. Only the 144,000 can really push this message. Now, yes, we do have the followers and believers of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, no doubt about it. But there's particular men that are really here to prophesy, to tell you what's going to happen, what the prophecies are, how to break the Bible down, how to get into spiritual things. You see, that's a very, very, small number that can actually do these things. All right. But there's also more, to a sacrifice. It doesn't just have to be that. Given that, what is that? Having charity, right? Brotherly love. For the followers and believers, giving tithes, offerings, gifts, whatever the case may be. You got, I'll even say this, hey, you just changing, becoming that new man, that new creature. That's showing that the Lord, that you really believe. All right, let me get this real quick, and I'll go back to that Sirach 35. But let me get James. I believe it's in the book of James. It talks about I'm going to show you my faith by my works, right? Okay. Because you'll have a lot of people that say, oh, you believe, right? But where are your works? What are you doing? And really, a lot of people are still, just that old man, Hey, there's still being a black, a Puerto Rican, a Mexican with the Hebrew Israelite twist. You see what I'm saying? That's all it is. Okay, so what? You don't eat pork anymore. So what? You don't commit adultery, right? Which I'll say that, those are good things to stop doing, obviously, right? But a lot of you guys are still calling on on a false name. You're still calling on JC. A lot of you are still getting lineups, having dreads. A lot of you are actually, because I think about IUIC. A lot of you are, meddling in, many matters. You know what I'm saying? What I mean by that is, you got that church and their congregation. They actually have men interfering with a man and his wife, right? Because don't they have quote unquote marriage counseling? That's madness. You see? I mean, there's so many other different things, that I can, bring up, but, what's the point? Okay? But, let me get this, James 2 and 17. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead being alone. Yea, man may say, thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy face without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Okay, so you got to show your your faith by your works. You got to do something. You see? You really got to do, produce. See, the Lord wants production. And the scriptures in Sirach even go into that about a slothful individual, a slothful servant. Maybe I'll get that real quick. All right. Give me 1 second. Of course, man. Just stuff's got to be stupid. Come on. It says here in Proverbs, or not Proverbs, Sirach. Let's get this one first. This is God, of course, not coming up. You gotta be kidding me. Here we go. Sirach 22:1. A slothful man is compared to a filthy stone, and everyone will hiss him out to his disgrace. A slothful man is compared to the filth of a dunghill. Every man that takes it up will shake his hand. And you see, the Lord hates a slothful individual. Okay, everybody does, actually, not just the Lord. Okay, it's not a good trait, a good attribute to have. Everybody loves a hard worker, and that's how we have to be in this thing. Now, of course, there's balance. There's times where you need some rest, you need to rejuvenate, right? But you really got to put in that work. You see? Let's get a couple more. This is Romans chapter 12, verse 11. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. You see? Can't be slothful in business. And remember, hey, we're doing the will of the Father, right? We're just like Yahweh Shai. He said, well, I'm here to do my Father's business. All right? When we come in that same stead, that same spirit, okay? We're not here to have a good time. And we're supposed to be in a house of mourning. Especially, in this time period. Because you look at the Passover during the time of, the Exodus. It was serious business. Okay? The Lord was killing the firstborns out there, the firstborn sons, right? In particular, of course, those Egyptians, they didn't have the blood of the lamb on their doorpost, okay? Which that represents, Yahweh Shai now. He is that lamb, and what his blood was shed for us. And the modern day doorpost is your mind, See, if you're part of the elect, you have that the blood of the lamb on you, okay, and you're going to be good. But see, if you don't have that, you're through. And we see guys out there that clearly, hey, they don't got the spirit of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai on them. They don't have the covering of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai. And the Lord either deletes them, okay, and if he doesn't delete them, physically speaking, what he does is he mentally destroys them. And you see that with our people. They're gone, man. They're into this system, right? The Republicans, the Democrats. They're into the Christian church. They're into everything under the sun but Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai. And they're out of their minds, man. Okay? All right. Slocky, I'm just seeing what other scriptures are here for slothful. Really, that Matthew's the 25th chapter. It goes into it. That's a good chapter to read. You know, it goes into that slothful servant. Lord was angry with him. Okay, but let me go back to that Sirach now. What was it, 35? We didn't finish that off. This is Sirach 35:4 now. Thou shalt not appear empty before the Lord, for all these things are to be done because of the commandment. The offering of the righteous maketh the altar fat. See? Those righteous spiritual sacrifices make the altar fat. See? It says, and the sweet savor thereof is before the Most High. The sacrifice of a just man is acceptable, and the memorial thereof shall never be forgotten. Okay? And you see, if you're doing the right thing, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you know, the Lord is going to remember these things. All right? Let me get that real quick. I believe that's in the book of Hebrews. It talks about how the Lord is not going to forget your, you know, works and labor of love. Right? Give me 1 second to get that. You know, the Lord's going to remember these things. That real quick. This is Hebrews 6:10, and it reads here, for Yahweh is not unrighteous to forget your works and labor of love, which ye have showed towards his name, and that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister. See, the Lord's not going to forget what you put into the pot. Okay? What you've been doing. Okay, so if you've been sowing all these works, you know, you've been, like I said, putting it into the pot, you're going to be able to reap these things. Okay? And you see a lot of guys, and I've been saying this for some time, I've been telling this to a couple brothers, maybe I might have mentioned it even a few times in our Thursday classes. As of late, I've been saying a lot of guys are not going to be happy with their reward, you know, because what's going to happen is, you know, when this system collapses, right, and it's, you know, what they will call judgment day, right, when Yahushua makes his second return, you know, the Lord, he's going to hand out different prizes, right, and the majority of this earth, they're going to receive a wicked reward, you know, a wicked prize. All right. Now, of course, the elect, they're going to receive that righteous prize, that righteous reward. You see? But point being, though, is a lot of guys, when the Lord comes, their sacrifices aren't going to be accepted. You know? It's going to be like the whole situation with Cain. You know, Cain gave basically a bogus sacrifice. Something that wasn't legitimate. And the Lord was displeased with it. And then what's crazy is Cain was mad that the Lord was displeased with his offering. You know? And you got to remember, Cain knew what to do. You know, he was, you know, a son of Adam. And Adam, you know, he had the, you know, the wisdom, right? He understood what was going on. And you know, he taught his sons, you know, which is, you know, Cain and Abel. But Cain, he was stingy. You know, basically being a niggard. Okay? That's what it was about. And I'll say this, there's guys out there, and a lot of guys too. A lot of you guys are really giving some, you know, stingy, niggardy, if that's a word. If not, whatever, I made it up. You know, sacrifices. You know? And I'll say this, here in Chicago, we've been around individuals that, you know, didn't, you know, want to help the brotherhood out. Didn't want to make lessons. You know, they didn't want to edify the, you know, the flock. And eventually the Lord gave them that spiritual boot. Okay? You had this one individual, and he was a younger brother in the camp at the time. Probably in it for like maybe 3 years. I'll say maybe about 3 years. And, he was a brother that had a car, and he made a statement. Oh, and I'll say this, you had certain elders that actually don't have a car out here, asking for help, and other brothers asking for help from time to time. And then eventually, he got so upset and he was so frustrated that he actually said, my car doesn't run on charity. He literally said that my car doesn't run on charity. And then, shortly after, the Lord gave him that spiritual boot. And I'll say this, let's just say for that man's situation, let's say he was a little uptight, with, driving brothers around, whatever the case may be, right? I mean, all he had to do was ask, for a couple bucks, like, hey, I have to help, a brother out. Can brothers, spare 10, 20 bucks and need it for gas? Whatever the case may be, And brothers would have, definitely, pitched in. You might have had a brother pay the whole thing. Maybe a couple brothers throwing $5. And then, boom, the situation's handled. But see, it wasn't even about the money. It was about the act of him actually having to be brotherly, right? And let me get that in the book of John, right? Because the scriptures say, what? If you don't love your brother, right, that you can see, how could you love the Lord that you cannot see, right? Let me get that real quick. See, a lot of these guys, they don't got that love in them. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. A lot of these guys are snakes in the grass. You know what I'm saying? You see? But let me get this. Give me 1 second. I forget where it's at. I'm driving to. Let's try 1 John 2. Yeah, here we go. I'll start here. This is 1 John chapter 2. And I'll start at verse 7. Yeah, we'll start at 7. Brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment which ye have from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which ye have heard from the beginning. Again, a new commandment I write unto you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is past, and the true light now shineth. He that saith he is in the light, and hateth his brother, is in darkness even until now. He that loveth his brother abideth in light, and there is none occasion of stumbling in him. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he go, because the darkness hath blinded his eyes. And you see, you got a lot of guys out there that actually hate other brothers amongst them. And that's wicked. And the Lord, like I said, he eventually gives that spiritual boot. They get kicked out. The Lord doesn't deal with that bullshit. Because I'll say this, there was another guy, man, he would do X amount of videos, go to classes, read all these, different books, throughout the week. He was one of them guys. I read this, I watched, all these apostle videos, did this and did that, right? He was one of them, quote unquote, studious, all right, jakes. You gotta always watch out for them type of guys too, man. All right, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being studious, but when somebody starts, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll use this loosely, thinking that he's better than you because he's been, reading, X amount of books or watching X amount of videos or doing X amount of videos in said time. Watch out for those type of individuals who, speak with, eloquent words. I always have a problem pronouncing that word. Watch out for the individuals, man. Now, of course, there are brothers who are, better in speech, that are, good with their studies, but once they become proud, yeah, man, you got to check that guy and scopeo him, okay? But we had a guy like that do all those things, but did this guy, had issues picking brothers up, had issues, helping out with money? Had issues with getting an order. And then what happened to him? He got kicked out. And then he ended up becoming one of the biggest scoffers, for Chicago. And I always talk about him, the Glizzy Gobbler. Then, like I told him, that eventually he's going to fade to black. And that's what has happened. I haven't seen this guy post anything, do any videos. He's just out there in the world through now, All that because he secretly hated, different men in this camp. He was actually very envious and covetous too, right? Because I believe, he was envious, certain brothers who were able to get women easily, certain brothers that had, wives and families. Because that was, one of his weaknesses. He didn't have, that experience. He wasn't a ladies' man, so to speak. See? All right. So there's a lot to this thing, man. It's not just, one thing. But at the end of the day, for us, like I said, let's continue to keep, offering these spiritual sacrifices. Let's present something to the Lord so he can be pleased. All right? And it's really not a hard thing. Okay? Now, of course, you have your moments, where you have your battles in this faith. But at the end of the day, this is, something that's not impossible, right? And the Lord said it, best. What? Or I believe it's the Apostle Peter who said this, or Paul, excuse me. He said that this is a light affliction, And he also said, I think that's in Philippians. He says, I can do all things. Okay. Basically through Yahweh Shai, roughly paraphrasing it. All we got to do is, believe on Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, or believe in Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, and that's it. And just keep fighting and don't give up. That was something. I'll say this, because we had the beloved, Apostle Rakah. He came up here to Chicago for a few days before he had to head out, and one of the things that he mentioned, at the end of camp, he talked about a few things, after our camp on Saturday. But the one thing that stuck out to me is that he said, basically said, look, hey, brothers, keep doing what you're doing. He said, hey, we have a beautiful leadership up here. All right. He said, we're beautiful brothers. He said to just basically endure to the end. Just keep doing our videos, keep being brotherly, keep fighting. That was, one of the main things that he was talking about in our, in our meeting. And that's what we got to do, and that's for all of us. We've learned, from the apostles, right? That we're given these positions by Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. And now, we know what to do. We know the blueprint. This is not, something that's, new to us. Okay? If you've been in this truth for, a good year or two, honestly, you know what to do. Now, of course, you still need spiritual guidance. All right. But what I'm trying to get at is you know what to do. All right. You're not hearing this for the first time, so to speak. Okay. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to end this lesson. I just wanted to do a quick in transit. And hopefully, this was an edifying one. And with that, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. Also, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and salutations to all you brothers out there. Shalom.